started slipping. Now when I'm feeling wild, there's a mountain I'll go for a while, and there's nothing to do. Just watch the clouds roll through.
This month marks my 8th year living in Japan. Before I moved here, I was just ticking along in life. I wasn't necessarily unhappy, but it sort of felt like I was performing a version of myself just to fit into the world around me. There was this deep misalignment that I couldn't name. I simply didn't know any different and had no way to compare my life to an alternative. Then, in my final year of university, I was invited on a trip to Japan which really changed my life. I knew nothing about the country, but during those 2 weeks, something deep inside me woke up for the first time. I went from knowing nothing about Japan to becoming obsessed with starting a new life there. I remember waking up early from jet lag on that first morning of the trip. I stepped outside for a walk whilst my friends were still asleep. I had never been so aware of just being somewhere. All of my senses seemed to be taking in something completely new at once. The buildings, slotted together like puzzle pieces, impossibly narrow and fighting for every inch of space, all tangled beneath that chaotic web of black power lines. The warm summer air, the hum of pedestrian lights and convenience stores, the scent of nearby restaurants preparing foods that I had never even tried. Together, these elements gave me that unmistakable feeling I am somewhere entirely different. I was certain that moving to Japan was the answer to how I was feeling, and in hindsight, I wasn't necessarily wrong. Moving to Japan has changed many things for me, but something that I didn't realize back then was that this feeling was just a red herring, and Japan was essentially just a mirror reflecting a part of me that I hadn't yet found. And that feeling, the magic and infatuation of discovery, well, that wouldn't last forever either. Japan is now in the spotlight more than it ever has been. If you've only visited for the first time recently, you might find it hard to believe that just a few years ago, you could walk through Shibuya or Shinjuku and only see a handful of tourists. I see so many people experiencing exactly what I felt 8 years ago. I feel many are craving a world where people look out for each other, a place that functions, a break from the headache that Western society really has become. For many, Japan is the first time that they get to experience a society that prioritizes collective harmony and functional order. It offers a powerful contrast to the friction that they may have left behind, and that validates the hope that a more civil way of life is possible. But for those of us who discovered this before the crowds, there is also the disenchantment of watching a private discovery become a global commodity. I've often heard expats say how it's 10 or 20 years too late, that the golden age of living in Japan is over, where there weren't many foreigners at all, and those who were living here were able to experience the culture unfiltered by global attention. They were treated with curiosity and sometimes infatuation compared to the more recent indifference and, in some cases, intolerance that has been caused by the mass wave of tourism. But this isn't about gatekeeping. It's a reflection of the human condition and the inevitable loss of novelty as we search for the next thing that we feel will inject meaning into our lives. It's a type of melancholy as intimacy is lost to exposure, and I think this is a feeling that is universally relatable. It's akin to an unknown song you discovered in private, becoming a viral sound on social media. The song itself hasn't changed, but your private relationship to it is gone. That feeling isn't just disappointment, it's a kind of low-grade grief. You feel genuine sadness when something you once loved loses its spark, like no longer enjoying an old hobby or growing bored of a favorite game, even though the change is entirely internal. All of this increased exposure, combined with having lived here for almost a decade, has made me somewhat disillusioned. It's like when you start a relationship with a new person for the first time. At the beginning, you're sort of blind to the reality, and you create this idealized version of them in your mind. But as the attachment hormones wash away, you're confronted with the reality, and you can see the person for who they truly are, and this is where the real test of compatibility begins. Now, of course, I'm not sad that more people are coming to Japan, and I do think it's ultimately a positive thing that more people are getting to come here and see the culture for how it really is. But all of this has definitely made me reflect on how novelty always fades over time. It's just the inevitable emotional shift as intimacy becomes collective. But more recently, this shift created an existential gap. This place I moved to for something extraordinary had become ordinary. The thing I once felt was the answer to all of my old problems is now just a backdrop to my new ones. This video is a reflection on the complexities of human nature, the journey of impermanence, and the shift from novelty to belonging. The truth is, Japan does offer a genuine, powerful sense of relief from what might be your familiar surroundings and your own culture. And the happiness that you might feel from visiting or moving here is real. But importantly, the infatuation isn't with Japan itself, but with the piece that we project onto it. It becomes a sort of blank canvas for our unfulfilled cultural longings. I mean, who doesn't want to live in a place where everything is clean, where things work not just as intended, but with functional precision, and where you have this overwhelming sense of personal safety and reciprocal respect? However, Japan presents a near-perfect public face, this carefully maintained aesthetic that many tourists mistake for the whole reality. When the illusion fades, the disillusionment hits harder than it would elsewhere. You realize that the human struggle, the bureaucracy, the social pressure, the personal insecurity, that all exists here too. As a tourist, you're not spending hours at the city hall navigating endless paperwork or stressing over small bureaucracies you didn't even know existed. And once that flawless container is exposed, the messy humanity rushes out. Japan is now viewing foreigners through a clearer lens, and that whole special treatment rarely exists these days. I think the loss of this external validation is potentially being misinterpreted by some residents as the country changing, potentially for the worse. But in reality, it's just a simple loss of personal privilege, one that was really only built on novelty anyway. For me, this was the crucial realization. On the surface, Japan may have changed, but fundamentally, it's still the same. Things feel different because I am different. The moment novelty becomes routine, we start to look for the next better thing. That chase can easily continue when we believe that our own internal frictions can be solved externally. That illusion cracked for me a couple of years ago during a period of intense stress and anxiety. My life felt full in ways that I hadn't really processed. Too many thoughts, too many pressures, all quietly building in the background. I remember walking through Tokyo during what felt like a personal breaking point. This place that once overwhelmed me with possibility suddenly felt distant, almost flat. Those convenience store chimes, the pedestrian crossing jingles, they were just sounds again, nothing more. It didn't drown out my thoughts anymore. It didn't distract me from myself. In that moment, it was just a backdrop, no different from anywhere else. That's when I knew Japan wasn't a refuge for my internal problems. It was simply a place I happened to be living, and the Japan dream that I carried for years couldn't protect me from what was happening inside. That moment made it clear to me that infatuation isn't built to last. We're constantly chasing this distant light that we feel will reset our happiness, but the second we step onto that new ground, it ceases to be that goal anymore and just becomes the new floor that we stand on. And this is the uncomfortable truth. That frustration foreign residents may feel towards tourists is often envy. Yes, poor behavior of tourists has an overwhelmingly negative impact on the perception of all foreigners. That is true. But underneath that frustration is something more human. You see visitors getting that dopamine hit that you can no longer access. It's not like you're jealous of them, but you're grieving a version of yourself that could once be amazed by everything here. That's not something to be ashamed of though. Recognizing this is not a moral failing. It's human nature, and acknowledging it provides a powerful sense of relief. And once that realization clicked, it opened up a deeper identity crisis. Living here has inadvertently made me feel even more disconnected from my home culture, but still not truly integrated into my new one, stuck in that space in between. This can be unsettling because Japan isn't the kind of place that easily rewards this hybrid identity, and you soon realize that this space isn't some temporary phase. It's a permanent, fluid state that you have to learn how to navigate. In this, you realize that the high you may have chased was passive. It just happens to you. Your ego seeks that fleeting validation of being special in a foreign land or experiencing something new. But maturity, conversely, demands something active, the commitment to finding peace in the ordinary and mundane. The novelty and infatuation that you initially felt is like admiring a beautiful and well-kept garden. But once that feeling fades, it dawns on you that the garden can't sustain itself. You either walk away or realize that you must become the gardener. You have to put the work in, but you know that you're doing it to make something beautiful and sustainable. The foundations of that dream that once led me here no longer exist, and I accept that, but this distinction is the fundamental difference between chasing novelty and building sustainability, which is crucial if you want to live here long term. But that leaves only one question. How do we learn to love the ordinary and find belonging in the familiar? After living here for long enough, the novelty inevitably wears off, and when that happens, it's easy to look at Japan through a more critical lens. The truth is, much of that frustration comes from recognition. You realize how shallow your early understanding really was, not because you feel like you have some kind of moral superiority, but because you finally stopped using Japan as a backdrop for your own story. In many Western countries, you often grow up thinking in terms of how the world impacts you, your conveniences, your comfort, and your identity. But here the focus is almost inverted. You're quietly expected to consider how you impact the world around you. It's a different kind of social consciousness, and whether you realize it or not, if you live here long enough, Japan will quietly nudge you towards it. It's not like Japan makes you confront your ego directly, it just quietly stops rewarding it. And you either have to adapt to that reality or you suffer from it. I didn't come to Japan expecting any of this. I thought I was chasing a dream, but what I really got was a kind of ego dismantling. Moving here didn't solve anything, it just reset the countdown. And I learned that if you can't sit still with yourself, Japan or anywhere else won't save you. But once you stop leaning on novelty and once the honeymoon period ends, you're left with something more permanent. The raw texture of life as it is. It's no longer about chasing that next high anymore. It's about learning to live here fully, to see the ordinary and to participate rather than consume. It's about learning to train your eye and your ego to find meaning in what really matters. For me, that meant picking up my camera and capturing the world as it really is, or riding my motorcycle to find new places, or even making these videos. More than just hobbies, they're tools for training my eye, for noticing again, for appreciating the world as it is instead of what I want or what I think it should be to me. And the shift is subtle, but real. You start reconnecting with the thing that drew you here in the first place. Because ultimately, beneath all the novelty and hype, there is a deeper reason people were drawn to this place. But it is easy to mistake that with what you see on the surface. The reality is far subtler and far simpler. It's the consistency of attention and care to life itself, the daily rhythms, the small courtesies, and the way that daily life just works because everybody silently agrees to make it work. Sure, there are a lot of people that visit or move here that will never tune into that. They come for anime or food or conveniences or whatever it might be, but drift away once that novelty fades. But the people that stay and the people that feel something that they can't quite shake are usually responding to that deeper structure because it hits on a personal level and feels stable in a world that is anything but. And the longer you're here, the more that matters. And once the butterflies wore off, realizing this made living here far more meaningful than it ever did. And it's around this point that Japanese ideas like wabi-sabi stop sounding poetic and start feeling practical. Being able to notice the beauty in the imperfect and the ordinary, and letting life move the way that it wants to, and not trying to hold on to things out of your control. There's a kind of peace that comes from accepting and even appreciating impermanence instead of resisting it. The dream doesn't die when the novelty fades. it begins. I used to think that home was a place where I'd stop feeling incomplete, but now I realize that home is just a place where you stop looking for the exits. It's where you stop chasing the next thing and start taking care of the current thing. Because when Japan stopped feeling special, I finally began to feel at home.